Welcome to Unveiled, guys. In this podcast, we talk about stuff like theories, right? Get into a little bit of arguments, okay? Go into some deep topics, right? Today, I think we're talking about evolution, right, guys? So, tell me, what do you think the theory of evolution is true or no?
I think it's a load of hot garbage.
Okay.
All right. Why do you think that?
Eddie, what about you, man? What do you think?
Well, I need more context to go on because
Well,
there's several arguments to it.
Well, like, what's your general opinion on evolution?
Do you think evolution happens or no?
Well,
like,
yeah.
Do you think it's real?
We had to have come from somewhere.
Right.
Okay.
Our genetic material had to change at some point in time, and it's probably continually changing now.
Okay.
We may not see it
All
yet.
right. What about you, Jace? You think
I like that idea.
you support Eddie on that one? All right.
Okay, how about you? What do you think?
I don't know. I'm kind of here to learn.
Okay.
Figure out a little bit. I feel like I'm a little out of my
cool.
depth on this one.
All right, got it. So let's
Safe
just
bet,
get
just not trying to get
started,
you.
I guess. So I'm really against you two, right? And so I'm against you two, and I'm trying to convince him that I'm right.
So make
pretty much what
your
we're
point.
doing.
All right.
We'll just kind of cast
Yeah,
it
yeah.
My
out.
point? Okay, so I just don't think there's enough evidence of evolution.
And you think there's more evidence that we just appeared?
Well, I'm a creationist, right? So
You know,
that
it
basically
is
means
a truth. I've heard this before. Right? I don't know how true it is, but I think this is true, right? It is easier to believe in God because it's just like, just happened. You know what I mean? Rather than like try and come up with some theory behind all of it. You know what I mean? Like it is more work to think of it, right?
Something like-
I'm not saying one's true
It's
or
more-
not, right?
It's
I'm
more
just
work
saying-
to think of it, but like, I feel like it's less logical to think that we
less
just
logic.
appeared.
Okay, so as a creationist, I believe obviously that
The Earth
we
is
were
only
created.
a couple thousand years old.
Creationist,
Well,
what's
like
that?
8,000. All right. And so, as far as like the age of the Earth, that's debatable. I think I'm more of a young Earth kind of guy, right? I think it's like 6,000 to 8,000 years old. And in that case, evolution can't be true. All right. So that's the main reason I argue against it. Now, in my view, there's just not enough evidence. And evolution is a theory, right? I think there's not enough to no evidence to prove that evolution actually happened. And as far as it being easier to believe that we were all just, snapped into existence, that's easier to believe, but I also think that would be the more logical
All right,
conclusion.
so let's take it back a little further, right? You believe in the Big Bang Theory? Do you think that it just, boom, happened,
No.
we were here?
No, I don't.
You don't think that's it?
I-
I mean,
I-
maybe not that we're here, but like you think that's just happened?
Well, okay, you have to
we're
think.
here.
Here's kind of how I think of it. All right, either evolution is true, or the Earth is billions of years old and the Big Bang happened, all that. So if you're looking from that view, then you have to argue that something came from nothing. That's your argument.
Well, it's not that something
My
came from
argument-
nothing. The Big Bang was like two universes colliding or something
Okay,
like
but
that.
where do
where
those
do
universes
universes
come
come
from?
from?
That's my
That's
point.
true.
Something had to come from nothing. My view is that something came from something.
You guys ever heard that like thing about stars? And they think that how stars are created, right? Is one star blows up, right? And then just all the particles kind of like come back together and form a new star, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you'd have to start it somehow.
Like,
you'd have to start from somewhere.
You
I
ever,
believe
blown
that.
some up in a lab or something, right? There's no putting that back together, bro. It's chemically changed. It's gone. Like, yeah.
But I just want to tell on what you said earlier about like believing God. Like I don't want to get religious. I'm just
No,
saying.
yeah.
For me, it's easier to believe that we were hand created because we're all unique in our own way. Like
That's true.
we have to have come from somewhere. I'm not a scientist, so I don't necessarily believe in the Big Bang Theory.
Right.
I just don't see how that can shape us to the way we are now. But
Well, how about we go over religions real quick? I feel like you're a Christian, right?
Yes.
Yes.
The same.
What about you, Eddie?
Yeah.
Christian as well? You?
Agnostic.
Agnostic? Okay. I think I'm the same. Agnostic is like you don't believe in anything, right?
well,
Well,
it's like you're kinda
agnostic is
skeptical.
like you believe in God, but like you don't worship Him.
Okay.
Well, agnostic is more like you're not against the idea of there being a God out there. It's more like
Yeah.
there could have been something that created us, but you're not sure. And
Okay.
that thing that created us could have like no relationship with us at all. It could just be out there, just
Okay.
created us and left us. It's just not denying the idea of there being a God. That's
Yeah.
what agnostic is.
But like, you don't necessarily believe in it.
So none of us are like, there's no God, like.
I mean, none of us are atheists.
Okay, yeah. I just want to clarify before we continue. All right. Back to what you were saying though, Tom.
So my argument is it more logical to believe that nothing came from something, or that
Something came from
something
nothing.
came from something? Like that's really the argument, because with the Big Bang Theory, you have nothing, not even like space, right? Like there's nothing. And we see space expanding, so we know that there's nothing outside of space, right? And so you have nothing, not even space, and then something happens, boom, now everything's
I don't
expanding.
know. Space is expanding. Like, who figured that out?
Well, it's something about the light. We can see like stars and planets moving away from each other. We see the light like bending in certain ways.
So is it?
Well, how do we know
like
that's
growing bigger? Or is it stretching?
How
or
do
are
we
just
know-
being able to see further? Like,
Yeah.
Well, it's and I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't know enough about it, and so I
Okay.
don't want to give anyone wrong information. But from what I understand, we've studied the way things look in space, and they look different over a certain amount of time, and that's because everything is moving away from each other. Because if we all started from one point,
because every year the moon gets a centimeter farther from the Earth or something like that.
yeah, it could be something like that.
I've heard about that. Well, I've also heard the Earth is like slowly tipping over, isn't it too?
Yeah,
And they're
because like our axis is weird.
Well, like there's this theory I heard, right? And it's like at some point, right? And this is what caused like the ice age, like the last one, I guess. Right? And they're like, what happens is like the axis tilts, so it's like completely like there's no like real sense of direction in space, right? But I guess vertical to what we think it is now, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Or horizontal, my bad. Right? And then the poles will like flip or something like that, and it rights itself. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know about all
See,
that.
and that again, that
I
would
thought
be
the ice age was caused by like a volcano, like one of the super volcanoes erupting.
And like
See, it
block
could
out
be
the
that.
sun and stuff.
Yeah.
See, I've heard that too, but I'm like, the reason I think this, right, is also because of Elon Musk's theory. Elon Musk wants to nuke the poles of Mars, so it heats
Yeah,
it up, right?
and like to melt the ice
Right.
caps on Mars.
But he's like, who was it? It was Joe Rogan and this other guy who actually been to the moon or something like that. I forget his name, but he's like, yeah, the reason this wouldn't work is because of an ozone layer, right? And they're like, if you nuke Mars, right, it's gonna destroy everything. He's like, it's gonna heat it up, right? It's gonna get warmer. There's gonna be no like protective layer over Mars. So instead of freezing, it'll be just hot, and there'll be no protection from the sun. Like, you know, we put on sunscreen and stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's for the 1% of the sun that gets through our layers. Like, I'm like, dang. Like, it's crazy. Like, yeah. Like, if you're out in space, you know, you're in like direct sunlight, right? Like, you've seen spacesuits, bro. They're like
Giant.
Like,
you know what's actually crazy
Yeah.
about that?
Huh.
The fact that Earth is so perfectly suited for humans to live.
It's a little, yeah.
But
it's
there's
a little weird.
there's other planets that are exactly like ours.
Well,
They
there-
found like
there are-
water on other planets.
Yeah,
There's,
we
like-
just don't know if they should stay
one,
alive.
but we don't know if there's life on it or not.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know if there's life on it because we can't like
go
visit
out.
or like direct like send probes or anything to it. But they found something called the Goldilocks system, and it's
Yeah.
got 3
Yeah, and
planets
so
that are like
There's a lot of
geographically
planets like
identical to our
ours. There's a lot of planets like ours. You can't really argue that. But you know, we won't even talk about this until we figure out whether or not there's life. I don't think there's going to be life on
Yeah,
those
the question
planets.
is about life, right? I mean, we know there's life on this planet, right?
Yeah.
The question is evolution, right? So we know there's life here. How did it get here, right?
Yeah,
You think,
hone in.
not evolution, right?
I think not evolution. And here's my thing. You guys are going to have to try to convince me or argue against the fact that something came from nothing. How does that happen?
It's true. He is kind of like,
So more so like, where did we come from?
Where did we come from?
Yeah.
And like this is from the beginning.
Well, I mean, obviously we're not scientists, so we don't know all the
like
facts
straying
about
away
it.
from like religious. So like not just God created us, more like
Yeah, like
evolutionary.
if
My
God
bad. I got a little bit of a question, all right? So you both believe in God, right? You're both Christians, right? But you don't believe in evolution. You do, right?
yeah.
Well, there's a lot
So-
of scientists who do believe in God.
Yeah. But I'm saying like, if you believe in evolution, you believe that God didn't create us, or you do.
That's a good question. You
Yeah.
got me there. Okay.
Well, because I'm like, if God created us, right, then evolution's flawed, or it's not what we think it is, or
more
it doesn't
so,
exist,
he
right?
created us, and evolution is just something that happened. You know, not
So-
adaptation. Like
well,
you
if
were
he
saying.
created us, did he create us to evolve? Is that technically God who created evolution?
I mean, everything happens for a reason. You know,
Right.
I believe that everything is laid out. That we don't know it yet, but it will eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So
You believe the same?
Well, I think that just depends on how you interpret Genesis, because that's where we find.
Genesis isn't the only book, right?
Well, no, but that's the book about creation, like in the beginning.
Okay.
And so it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it talks about His entire creation process being 7 days. Those days could either be 24-hour periods. Those days could be billions of years. I believe the more literal translation. I don't think they were exactly 24 hours
You guys ever
because
heard of dispensations?
no.
You know what that is? So, I don't know if it's like a biblical term. I come from Mormonism, right? Which is a little different. They got like more books and stuff. But I don't know. I believe some of it. A lot of it makes sense to me. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna try not to bring religion too much into it, right? But a dispensation is said to be about 1,000 years, right? And the whole theory is that, right, we're living in the last dispensation before God comes back. I feel like a lot of other Christian like denominations believe this too, right?
I think, yeah.
Like it's happening soon. I mean, everyone's kind of said that for thousands of years, but
Yeah,
you know,
there's-
right? Anyways, 1,000 years dispensation, right? But like, so a dispensation is also considered a day in the eyes of God or something like that, right? So you know how the earth in the Bible, it says it was created in 7 days, right?
Yep.
Or 6 days, but he rested on the seventh, right?
Yeah.
It's like, does that mean 6,000 years? And then on the sixth day, we were made, right? Adam was made. So,
See, it could be something like that.
yeah.
Now, as far as this goes, as far as like Christianity as a whole goes, this isn't something that's gonna, keep you out of heaven. This is
Right.
one of those things that you can debate about, but it's not like necessary for salvation. But what the reason? Let's say the 7 days. I think the word for it was yom that they used. It's called yom, and there's.
Like a J.
Well, it could have been. I'm not exactly sure, but now the way this word is translated, it could mean that, like what you said, it could have been thousands of years between each day, and it really just depends on how you interpret it. I believe the more literal, like God created these things on these days, and I don't think that's like illogical to believe,
Okay.
in my opinion, because
But
if you
say it
have
was,
an
like,
all-powerful
thousands of years, doesn't that mean that God could have just slowly evolved something from something
Exactly,
else,
and so
you know?
that's why it's not like a bad thing to believe in evolution. I think the evidence I think as far as evidence and logic goes, I think it's more logical to believe that the Earth isn't billions of years old, and I think evolution just can't work, and that we have never seen it, and we will never see it.
That's fair, I guess. It's true. We haven't really seen evolution, have we? We haven't been in here long enough, I guess. But
See, and here's what
do you think
evolution.
about that, Eddie?
Well,
Well, my problem with or my bad, you go.
no.
No, you
I'm
got it.
trying to think of it. I wouldn't if there are people back. Is this about around the time where people were a thing?
Yeah,
Maybe they
So-
saw it. It was more like an eyewitness testimony thing, and it's more like on us. If we can't explain it scientifically, then we have to rely on eyewitness testimony and perhaps in faith that maybe they
That's-
did it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing as far as it's not like an empty belief. Like as far as faith goes, there's a book by Frank Turk. He's an apologist. It's called "Not Enough Faith to Be an Atheist."
What's an apologist?
An apologist is basically someone who defends their religion, right? And so I'd be a Christian apologist because I'm defending my religion, and there's, Mormon apologists, there's Catholic apologists, just defending what they believe.
Okay.
And so Frank Turek, he is a Christian apologist, and he helped write a book. It's called Not Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And that's basically saying you have to have a lot of faith to believe that
I've
we
heard
came
this
from
book,
evolution,
actually, yeah.
because there's not a lot of evidence. Now, you need faith to believe that a God exists, but it's not just faith as in, you hope it's true, and if it's not, then it's whatever. It's more like there's tons of evidence to prove that, one, that there is a God, like logical. Like you can come to the logical conclusion that there is a God, and then, okay, so what is this higher power, and how is he in relation to us? Then you look at things like the different religious books and different eyewitness testimonies throughout the thousands of years that they've been written, and then you see which ones are more accurate, which ones you can actually go back and see, okay, yeah, this happened, and then you basically just narrow it down, and I believe that we've narrowed it down to a point where Christianity is the only logical one that makes sense. And then you have once you get to this point, that's when you start having debates about, Genesis says God created the earth in 7 days. Is that 7 literal days or billions of years? That's when you start getting to
Well, I don't think
discussions like that.
Well,
but
you said that you believe the Earth is only like 8,000 years old, right?
yes,
Well, we know that like time existed before Christ, right? Like so and so years BC,
yes,
and so after Christ, we've been going for like roughly 2,000 years, right? Because we're in 2023.
yep.
So,
Well, here's about
well,
that.
we know that like Christianity like existed before Christ. That was like what? How many years? Do you know?
Well, before Jesus, it wasn't Christianity; it was Judaism.
All right, and we know that Judaism existed for thousands of years before that, right?
Yes,
And we know that other religions existed for thousands of years before that.
not necessarily.
No, we don't
No?
actually know that yet.
No, like we have found really old.
Well, I mean, monotheistic faith was the newest, right? Because we know polytheistic was the big thing. Because like you've said it to me before, that since we didn't understand things, we couldn't prove with science yet. We assigned a God to it to make it make sense.
Now the thing with
Sometimes, I don't
that
know.
is you have to keep in mind, biblically, you have a lot of things happen from the beginning of the earth to now, right? And so one of those things was the big flood that happened. All right. So if this big flood happened, and then you have Noah and his family, they get off the ark, and then people start spreading across the world again. They leave, and I mean that's how we see a bunch of different records of
Wasn't
a big
there
flood
mountain
happening.
that like Noah ended up on?
Yeah, it was
Yeah, because
Mount
like he
Sinai.
sent the swan to
And
find
we
the
found.
olive branch.
By the way, we did find a big
Or the
boat
dove or whatever.
on Mount Sinai. So
I've
that's
heard
like
this, yeah. And there's
we found
there's
it.
a village called the Village of 8 or something, and it's like 10 miles away, like from the site, I guess. So it's
Yeah.
like,
And so we did find the ark, so it's there. Now that doesn't mean
But
that
who's
it's
to
the
say-
ark from Noah's day. We just found a big boat, but it was exactly where the Bible said it would land, and it makes sense. The
But the issue with that is that
measurements
like
are the exact same.
somebody who like read the Bible, knew where it would land, knew the measurements, they could have gone and built it. Who's to
Built
say
it
that they
in the
couldn't?
dirt. It's
pretty
fossilized
old, like,
wood.
Yeah.
It's fossilized wood buried in
Well,
the
we
dirt. They
don't
had
know
to
if
dig
it's
it
a
out.
boat, I don't think, but there's a lot of fossilized wood on the mountain.
Yeah, well, we don't know if it's a boat, but what we see is a bunch of fossilized wood in different like sections like this. So it's in the shape of a boat, the exact same dimensions it's supposed to be, cut off in different sections, the same material that was used to keep the wood together. It was like some sort of plaster or something. That
Called thatch, yeah.
yeah, that exact stuff in between the wood, same type of wood that was supposed to be used. And so I mean, we have a boat. Don't know if it's the ark, but it is.
Okay.
But anyway, as far as like the big flood goes, we have different societies talking about a big flood, which means there's a good chance that there was a big flood. Now, once that happened, ideas change, right? And especially before the flood happened, let's say there were documents that survived. The reason the flood had to happen is because you had societies just going absolutely insane. Like there was what were they called? The Canaanites, I think it was. I can't remember, so don't like quote me on that. But there was some sort of society, and what they would do, they would sacrifice babies to an idol called Molech, and this statue was like made of bronze, and it was kind of sitting there with its arms out like this, like it was cradling a baby. And what you would do, you would set a fire below it, and let the fire build up, and then you would throw your newborn baby on there, and just let it, burn, right?
That's pretty brutal.
It was brutal. And so what they would do, they would actually play the drums louder, because this was like a whole ceremony. They'd start playing their drums louder so you wouldn't be able to hear, the baby screaming. And
How do we know about all this?
well,
Like, where'd you learn about all this?
well, Frank Turek, I watched a lot of his videos.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, we have, like that didn't stop then either. Like that carried on, I'm pretty sure, after the flood.
Well, we know that there are like a bunch of different religious sects that sacrifice children.
Exactly. Now, here's the thing though. God decided, hey, that's not cool. And so he sent thousands of years of like prophets and messengers to go tell them, hey, you guys need to stop. And when they didn't stop, God said, okay, it's time to stop this. So what he did, he flooded the entire earth, right? Got rid of everyone who was evil, kept Noah and his family because he was, committed to God. They get off the ark. And let's say that there were some documents that survived from these other religions across the world, which wouldn't have been spread out too far across the world, but there were people. So they have
wasn't
their
the known world pretty much just the Middle East?
Middle East,
and,
yeah.
Like a little bit of Europe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very little of Europe. Like I think they knew about Italy, and that was about it. It was
Yeah.
Italy,
Well,
and then
'cause,
everything
yeah,
else was like Germanic tribes.
Like the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, they knew about that. Those are real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have these different religions, and they've completely abandoned God, and they're starting to follow their own things. They're going to write these things down, okay? Then the flood happens, everything gets buried, we restart. Now there's still different religions going around. And
How
then
are there still religions still going around? Because they found the old stuff, or
well, because
like if it's just Noah and his family, right?
I mean, we
How
see it in,
did
like-
we get other religions from that? Why isn't Christianity just the one, or Judaism? I guess
it's a great question, because, and here's also a really good point. If the Bible was inspired by man, I'm not saying it's not written by man, because obviously a man had to write it. If the Bible was inspired by men, why does it go against every single thing that men desire?
What do you mean?
For example, the
Doesn't it describe like everlasting happiness and like immortality and all that? That's
yeah,
not,
we
like, stuff
want
Yeah.
that, right?
want.
We want that, right?
Yeah.
But the way to get there goes
like,
against
straight and
everything we
narrow and
believe.
everything.
Yeah. So the path is narrow and few find it. The reason that is because I mean we see in the New Testament, Jesus comes in and he's not this nice guy who is trying to bring peace. He actually says that he's not here to bring peace, but a sword to divide families and stuff like that. Like Jesus was not your best friend. All right. Now he was friendly, he was kind, he was loving, but part of being loving was saying, "Hey, you're going to have to change the way you're going to live, or bad things are going to happen." And that was his message. And so, here's like the Old Testament laws were different from the New Testament laws, like the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. Part of that was, Jesus came up and said, I forget where this is. It would be somewhere in the Gospels, but he starts teaching these religious people. And he says, "You have heard it has been said, an eye for an eye," right?
Yeah.
Or, like,
I was like one of the
basically,
first
yeah.
like written laws of man.
yeah. So an eye for an eye. Like, if you do bad against me, I'll do bad against you. But Jesus says, forgive one another
Turn
as
the other cheek and stuff.
turn the other cheek. Exactly.
Does he say what? I don't know this for sure, right? But doesn't he say something about being meek? Like you should be like in meekness or kindness, something like that, right?
Well, you should humble yourself.
Yeah.
That was like a big thing he taught too. But also,
Or, like, you guys know who Jordan Peterson is?
yes.
I watch some of
Yes.
his stuff. He's like, he said this quote or whatever, and it's like, you're supposed to be meek, you're supposed to turn the other cheek, right? Be humble, that, right? He's like, the definition of meekness, right, is not like weakness, It's
Yeah.
not being like, it's like, he said it's like, the literal definition is like to know how to use a sword, but to keep it sheathed or something like that. It's like, the meek ones will inherit the earth or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, the meek will
That's
inherit
right.
the earth. But yeah, that's right.
Meek will inherit the earth. I'm like, yeah.
So yeah, God's not telling us to be weak. Jesus didn't come saying, "Hey, everyone, just kind of bow a knee to the world." He said, "Stand up against that, but also be different." Now, as like one of the big things back then was Jesus said, "You have heard it been said not to commit adultery," but then Jesus goes even further, and this is what makes people mad, right? He goes even further. He says, "If you even look at a woman with lust, you have committed adultery within your heart." So he's saying, if you even like look at someone and think something of them.
Adultery is like cheating, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, but like when you're married, though.
Exactly. And so if you even look at someone, whether you're married or not, if you look at a woman with lust, you have committed adultery within your heart. That was a serious thing back then, right? And so now,
Like,
Well, I mean,
applying to the
yes.
that's
that-
like a
that's
primal
part of it.
instinct as a man, though.
Exactly. That is what our flesh wants. That is what our flesh desires. Okay? And what Jesus teaches us and what the Bible teaches us is to go against what we desire. He says, pick
But that's
up
to
your
go
cross,
against. That's to go against human
follow
nature.
him daily.
Because like it's an instinct as a species to procreate.
Well,
This is
it's
true.
an
He's
instinct,
right.
right? But and here's what I believe. God created us with a purpose, right?
Doesn't it say somewhere that like man is the enemy of God or whatever, right? But the
Yeah.
spirit is the friend, something like that, right?
Exactly. And the exact okay. So what you said, our natural instincts, God created us with a purpose. So he gave every single body part we had as a purpose, all right? When we start abusing that purpose for pleasure, that's when it becomes a problem, because now we're looking away from God's initial design and we're abusing that pretty much. We're saying what I want to feel is more important than what he wanted to accomplish. So that's why it's a problem. Now here's
Well,
the
if
thing.
that were a
Okay,
problem, why
does
would he make it
Why
to
would
where
he
it's
make it feel
pleasurable?
good? Because it's supposed to. It's supposed to be an amazing, holy, sacred thing, and that sounds weird now because of the way society has made it. The only reason it is the way it is. Yeah, we'll get back.
So far away.
But the way
We'll
it's
come back
looked
to
at the way
evolution
it
eventually.
is,
Okay.
is because society said, "Hey, this feels good, so we're going to do whatever we can to make us feel better," right? And so we start abusing what was and still is supposed to be for a purpose. We're abusing that for our own pleasure. Now, it is supposed to bring pleasure because it's supposed to be a holy, sanctified thing. But it's not anymore because people have abused what God made for a purpose. Now, what were you said something about, you asked a question. I was going to get to you in a second.
I don't even remember.
I don't even remember. Anyway.
I like what you're saying, like kind of running it back to you said about going against everything man wants.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to
so
say.
that's what we're in the Bible. I'm not sure if it was written in the Bible. I'm not that educated. Something about if you want lust, you're supposed to resist it because everything that you want is not what you need.
Exactly.
So, more. I don't know if this relates necessarily. It's like saying if you exert yourself, you'll be humbled, but if you're humble, you'll be exerted. So every temptation you have is more so like the devil trying to get you to his side, trying to get you to go against God, which is why as Christians or as human beings we're supposed to resist these temptations.
So now, as far like just to kind of bring that all in to back to what we were talking about the existence of other religions. I think that's the point we were on. So the Bible tells us to go against what we want. We have it says our spirit and our flesh are in constant battle because our flesh wants these things and God says you don't need those things, depend on him. And so we're going to have to fight these, go the other way. Some people decided they didn't want to do that, right? And so what did they do? They went away from this and they started chasing things that made themselves feel good. And that's how you start getting other religions. That's how it works. And so they get off the ark and, they're praising God again. And this happens multiple times, like you see in Judges.
But like I said, we know that we assume that there were religions before Christ because we didn't believe in a monotheistic religion.
I mean,
Well,
for the
also
longest
keep in
time.
mind,
how you look at it, right?
Abraham wrote Genesis well after the flood, right? Like they still believed in God. Abraham wrote Genesis, which was inspired by God, well after the flood. This is when he was leading the Israelites out of captivity, right? And so, yes, we have documents before. Oh, was it Abraham or Moses? I can't remember.
Moses
Was
was
it
leading
Moses?
the Israelites out of Egypt.
Right?
So I think it was Abraham then who wrote. I'm not sure. Whoever wrote Genesis wrote it after all these other things were written about different religions. That doesn't disprove that the belief in God was not the first one. Right? And so, we let's say we do have.
Well, then why was the vast majority of religions polytheistic? So if you go back to Islam is they believe in Allah, right? Which is another form of God. But their whole thing started in what was it? It was Mecca, right? In Saudi Arabia.
That sounds right.
Something like that.
I think it was called Mecca, and it was with Muhammad and all that, right? Who meditated in a cave for how long was it? I feel like you would know.
Time. I have no idea.
It was a couple.
Probably a long time.
It was a couple months. Couple months.
Yeah, I'm wrong there.
But and he meditated in that cave, and the archangel, however the hell you say it, archangel Michael or whatever, would come and visit him and spread his gospel or whatever, and he brought that with him back to Mecca. But Mecca was I guess you could say it was a Mecca of religions. It was a city of all kinds of different polytheistic religions with all kinds of different beings that were worshipped, and Muhammad brought Islam into that city.
Okay, so I can explain this. Why were there a bunch more polytheistic religions than monotheistic religions? Or why do we see proof of that? One, because polytheistic would have been a lot more popular. Because again, monotheistic taught us go against your fleshly desires. Polytheistic, one, it gave a really easy explanation for where things came from. Look, if you don't want to believe in this God, then you're going to have to go out, but now you need a way to explain stuff. Because this God tells you don't get to live the way you want to live. You're going to be rebellious against him because we're
So
rebellious.
if those
in
were
spirit.
the easier ones, then why would a monotheistic God be thought up first?
Well, no, it's not that he was
if it
thought
made
up
more
first.
sense.
It's that he was first. He created people. People started believing in him. People decided they didn't like the way he did things, and so they left. But now, as generations happen, you have this dude whose kids are like, hey, Dad, how did we get here? Because we all question things like that, right? That's part of our nature. And now the dad can either say, oh, well, because there was a God who created us, but we don't like him because he doesn't let us do what we want to do. Or, oh, well, there's actually a God called, whatever, there's actually a God inside the sun riding the sun around. That's why the sun moves. It's not because God created it that way. It's because there's actually a God riding around in his fiery chariot. There's actually a God that controls the waves and stuff. It's not, God who created the moon and they couldn't explain tide back
And
then.
over
but-
time, we'd prove that was wrong with science,
We'd
right?
prove that's
so
wrong.
who's to
And-
say that over a more extended period of time, we won't prove that we actually did come from some other organism?
Well, okay, so let's
Going back to evolution.
Let's say that is
Because that
exactly
process-
why science is not something we should depend on for answers. Because
Why
science
not?
changes. 1,000 years ago, if you believed, if we believed now,
100 years ago, they were using leeches to make you feel better.
exactly
right?
100.
Think about it
Yeah,
for a second.
we'll go 100
Right.
years ago.
I didn't know that.
If we
Oh,
believed in
really?
the science 100 years
If you
ago,
got sick, they were like, you got bad blood, we gotta get out of you. They would
Yeah.
attach leeches to
So
you
that
for
was
it.
the thing. It's sucking the bad.
Yeah, and you paid
Exactly.
a lot of money for it. They were like, yeah, we're gonna
And
get
through
the blood
science,
out
we
of you.
learned that was wrong.
Yeah, that's.
science will always change because it is based off of what we observe.
But do you think
Alright.
it also changes because
Well,
of?
science.
Well, science is
also-
objective.
Yeah, it's only.
Yeah, because
people's
it's
opinions.
things that we see.
And
Now,
it's like, well,
that's why
well,
theories
these
exist.
facts, right? Science really is just opinions of whoever discovered it. Right?
Well, the theories are. So scientific theories are, hey, we actually can explain this based off of what, like based off of what we can observe. For example, evolution. We can't get a fish and put it in the right environment to see if it can evolve. We
Well, yeah,
can't do
it would
that.
take millions of years.
Okay, and so that's why we make a theory. So we can theorize that this happened, right? Now, as far as science goes, that is what we observe.
Well, we've made theories about many things, and a lot of them have been proven true.
A lot of them have, but a lot of them have.
Wrong.
Yeah, a lot of them
like what I
proven
said
wrong.
100 years ago, the theories they had back then look absolutely ridiculous, but that was what was accepted
Yeah,
at that
because
period
that's
of
what we
time.
could see.
Exactly. And so now that we can see further, right? We can see a lot of things. We can study a lot of things. The only religion right now that is holding up is a monotheistic belief in God. That's the only religion
Well, I
holding
mean,
up. Why is
Buddhism and Hinduism both hold up pretty well. They're both
that? Okay,
very
dude.
widely
they're
followed.
widespread, but they're also
But-
culturistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they've also
Like-
had to like change. I'm pretty sure I could be wrong, but they've had to change some like things that they believe because
I
of
don't think Hinduism has changed in like 2,000 years.
Maybe
or
not
something.
Hinduism.
I'm pretty sure it's been the same the whole time.
Like the main thing about Buddhism that changed is like they actually have a book now.
yeah. Well,
For,
I
like,
mean, also
thousands
Buddhism
of
is
years,
just
they
kind of
were
like
an
a
oral religion.
lifestyle you can live. You know,
Well, it's
like
still-
stay peaceful, meditate.
You still worship the Buddha. You don't believe he's God. He's just a prince.
Yeah,
who
so you still don't believe he
obtained-
created things. Like if we're talking about the creation of the earth, still it's either even Buddhists believe, okay, you can worship this guy right here and he'll bring you peace or whatever, but that still doesn't explain the beginning of everything. Us trying to explain the beginning of everything leads to polytheistic religions where this God does this God does this, and if we pray to them, then we'll get what we want. And all of those have fallen because of what we can observe.
Right.
The only one that hasn't fallen, as far as creation goes, is the belief in monotheistic God. That still doesn't prove it's the Christian God, right? We haven't proven that yet. But
Yeah, there's
I think it's logical to believe that evolution is not a good explanation for the origins of the earth. I think it is much more logical to believe that there was an intelligent creator, because we can observe an intelligent design in the earth, in every single aspect of the earth. There's an intelligent creator that created us,
What we are today.
what we are today. Now, did we look like what we did thousands of years ago? No, because we did have to adapt to survive, and I don't think adaptation is evolution. I think we have adapted in some ways in order to survive better because the environment does change. But I don't think evolution is a good explanation for the beginning, and I think it's much more logical to believe in a creative being that created and designed who we are and what we live on.
So going back a little bit, let's define that. What is the difference between adaptation and evolution? To you,
So-
right?
Well,
Alright.
to me, I see evolution as you have a fish and it has to turn into a lizard, and they have to change,
okay,
right?
that's evolution.
That would be evolution. We'd see one kind of animal turning into a different kind of animal.
Okay,
Adaptation is we see a fish breeding or going through whatever process, the water temperature changes slowly or something, and we see that fish turn into a different type of fish because of it. We see one kind of animal adapting or changing into the same kind of animal but with different features.
okay.
Okay.
And what were you
So-
saying, Jace? You're about to say.
I was gonna ask, like, how do you explain like the fact that there's literally two different types of human? There's a Neanderthal, which is, and then there's a Homo sapien.
What's the difference
Neanderthals
between them?
not exist anymore?
I think the last one died recently, or not recently,
Wait,
but
so they were real? Like,
yeah, they were real.
Well,
like they
what would
existed.
you say the difference between those are?
yeah, wait.
Well, a Neanderthal is closer to like what we would like see as like your typical human that came from an ape. They had like the slouched forehead, basically a caveman. They had the slouched foreheads, hunched backs, like they could walk on their fists and like on their feet and their fists and stuff.
on our fists.
Well, we can, but like I mean, like what I mean, like is that's how like their like preferred like way of walking was. Well, it's like they
Okay.
slouched
But
over
after-
and they could like run around on all
Okay,
fours
so
and
here's
shit.
here's my question to that, and I haven't studied this, so I'm not going to say anything I don't know, but that would raise some questions, right? How do we know if we found bone structures of these things? How do we know they
Yeah.
were people and not apes?
Because they existed in modern time. Their species
Okay.
didn't just die out.
There are some funny looking people even today. How do we know they're not like a different type? How do we know they just didn't have some sort of genetic mutation that made them look a certain way?
Well, I mean,
And
yeah,
then-
we can look at race a little bit. Have you ever looked at someone who's from India? They look
Yeah, people
different,
look
man.
different
Their structures are different
all
right?
across the world.
And
And
someone who's Chinese, bro, they're different, right?
And
Really
let's say, I mean, even this, let's think about this. Let's say we have this group of people and they migrate over to whatever spot and they decide they want to stay there and they start intermarrying with each other. The genetic mutations are going to increase a lot if you keep intermarrying with the same people over and over. And so now what we have are mutated people living isolated from society, and their population starts growing. And so all we have is humans who have mutated genetically. I don't think that proves evolution, and I don't think that disproves the existence of a God.
Okay.
So that's me not studying it. Like, I haven't studied it, so that could be like a super simple defense for it, and it's wrong or whatever. So we could study that and talk about it. But just off the top of my head, I feel like that would be a decent explanation for why we see people looking different over thousands or billions of years.
Thank you so much for watching episode 1 of Origins Unveiled. I hope you enjoyed the episode, but real quick, a word from our sponsors, Warehouse Creations. They are a husband and wife team of potters named Bill and Jenny Ware, and they create very interesting and unique pottery that is perfect for anything like home decor or gifts. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube to check out how they make their work and everything else they do.
Let's see it.